OWS fam, my dudes, Sharp Football Analysis Nation. I butchered that intro, but we are back, baby. We move on. We were just talking offline, Rich and I, that we both have had very little sleep recently. So excuse my stumbling on words, but we are back, baby. We are headed into week 14 of the year of our Lord 2023. And man, what a beautiful, honestly, I'm going to describe this as a beautiful slate it is, because I'm sure you've heard nothing but, oh my God, doom and gloom. This slate is atrocious. Where are we going to get points? But that is exactly the kind of slate that we can extract some EV from. So with that, welcome back to Searching for Ceiling, presented by 1 Week Season and Sharp Football Analysis. I am Hilow. Will be joined shortly by Rich Hribar. Let's dig in.
1 Week Season.
My dude, Rich, welcome, man. And I butchered that intro, that cold opening. But yeah, we both have been kind of on the mend and dealing with some stuff. We were talking before we jumped on here. Everything doing all right with yourself?
Yeah, it's spent some time with some illness, was down the last couple of days, but we're back. We're here. We only have 5 full weeks left. We only get so many of these. And
Stop it.
I don't know about you, but we have playoffs, and playoffs are always fun, but it's not the same,
Yeah.
right? It's we do DFS in the playoffs, and we do some sports betting stuff, but it's just not the same. We love these full weeks, and we only have 5 of them left. Let's cherish them.
That's insane, right? And we were also talking before we got on that, like, we feel like our process is on point right now, but we've been like sniffing, we've been at the door knocking, like, let us into that bink room, man. But I feel like it's coming, dude. I feel like it is coming. You and I have been all over it recently. So with that, thank you guys. Best part of the week. We appreciate that. Happy birthday, Mr. Thomas James Moran. We appreciate you joining us on your birthday, dude. Happy big 2-6. Let's go. Oh my God, I'm old. We digress. But I wanted to start today. I wanted to go through how we turn a slate. Yeah, right. It's fine. You didn't need to date yourself like that, man. Come on. I wanted to start today real quick at the beginning of this session here and talk about like how the process that we can take, that we can form these repeatable habit patterns where we can turn a slate like this into a beautiful slate, into something that we're excited to attack, and into something where we can generate expected value on the field. And that kind of starts with starting our process in a different spot than the field. How does the field start their process? Like this. The field starts their process by looking at game totals, looking at the game environments. And while that's not necessarily a bad thing, I think too much emphasis is placed on looking to Vegas lines and game totals to give us the cliff notes and the cheat sheet of the week. And what I mean by that is, on this slate, the field is highly likely to scroll down here and be like, oh my God, we have nothing in the early morning portion of the slate, and all the upside is held in the afternoon. Yes, Seattle, San Francisco, we know that they can play to a high scoring affair. Yes, the big name of the week, the marquee game of the week is the Buffalo Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs. But we also have, like, digging deeper into this slate, we have a Lions and Bears game with a moderate, we'll say, game total of 43.5. But what's interesting about that spot is look at the Lions' past month of play. You look at the points that have been scored in games involving the Lions over the past 4 weeks, an average of 62 points scored in games involving the Lions over the past 4 weeks. They have had a 79-pointer affair. So this is very clearly a team that has kind of been forced to win by scoring points. And why is that? Their defense has not been up to par. With respect to, I mean, the last kind of the opening act of this Lions team was everybody watching the first game of the season. They shut down Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, held them to 20 points. So it's like, okay, the Lions are here with their defense and they're going to win these dirty games. But since then, this team has had or been forced to outscore their opponent. And that's a nuanced saying or a nuanced statement. It's like, yeah, we know that you win games by scoring more than your opponents, but NFL franchises approach that very differently. The Lions of recent have had to keep their foot on the throttle and score points to win games. Yes, they're at 9-3. Yes, they are challenging for the number 1 seed in the NFC, but this team has some issues behind the scenes. So that is a spot that I am highly interested in. Another one is this Baltimore Ravens team. And you might also be thinking, Hilow, those are 2 games that are #weather concerns. Yes, there might be some wind, there might be some rain. These are grown-ass men. They're playing a grown-ass man's game. They are going to be just fine. We'll talk about weather in a little bit, but the overall process that leads us to identifying those spots as potential upside spots, we don't want to be thinking about weather until Saturday evening, Sunday morning, because there is a weird psychological effect that happens if you write off a team or a game earlier in the week because you're like, oh, well, they're expecting 20-mile-per-hour winds. That is very hard to come back from, as opposed to go through your process. Don't even look at weather, tune out everything else, identify the spots, and then we can react to if there's weather later on the week, because now you have not introduced those negative biases in your brain, which are very hard to come back from. Human psychology, whatever, it's nerd shit. But here we are. Rich, in that discussion of how do we identify and establish this repeatable habit pattern, are there any other spots that kind of you immediately were drawn to this week that the field might not be?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always someone that, because I've wrote a matchups article literally for 10 years,
Yeah.
that, I am more of an individual pieces, DFS player. I'm more honed in on the plays that I just think are the better plays, right? And then I will get into more of the game stacking and, the onslaught type elements of the game that a lot of people start off with. So I'm more or less looking for really sound individual plays, and I like when the games feature multiple of them, right? And that's how I will build kind of my construction around that. So Bears Lions has a lot of intriguing pieces in it. I think Colts Bengals has a plethora of individual pieces, especially in context of salary, right? And how we can build teams, because we always talk about on this show too. We're searching for ceiling, but kind of where the field is going to go in terms of lineup construction, right? We've talked about that weekly on this show. And, we have another quarterback slate for the second week in a row that is very top heavy. We have very limited access to quarterbacks that potentially have 30-point plus ceilings, right? And we talked about that last week. And what that does is twofold: is it allows you to either pay up for guys that have those ceilings, or it opens up the field to compete now, to pay down. You look at last week, we had guys like Joe Flacco at 4,600, be an immense value and unlock, what you can get to other rosters. We had Gardner Minshew get another top 12 week, Matthew Stafford. And we have another one of those weeks again this week where we really have Josh Allen at the top. We have Brock Purdy, who continuously kind of just floats around there in that price zone and continues to get there, but he's playing a team that, he hasn't scored a lot of points in his 3 starts against Seattle. And then you've got Lamar Jackson, and then we basically have the field kind of wide open again. I feel bad of not including Patrick Mahomes in that statement, but we have not seen that has not been Patrick Mahomes 2023, especially against teams that are capable defensively. So that's gonna be an interesting spot when we get there, that Chiefs game in general. But yeah, probably when I look at the early slate, Bears, Lions, and Cincinnati Bengals and Colts are the 2 games that kind of stand out early for me as offering a lot of pathways early on to unlocking some of what we can kind of chase later on in the afternoon.
Yeah, 100%. So as we go through that process of we have to have a repeatable starting point. For me, it is breaking down the games and looking for I kind of start macro and work my way narrow down. So I start with the breaking down the games, looking at the game environment as a whole. What is the likeliest way for this game to play out? Then I'll go to the individual teams. Can this team succeed or outproduce their expectation? And then I'm down to individual players. And structuring it that way for me allows me to keep out all the negative biases that can creep in, or keep out that feeling of, oh God, the Chiefs and the Bills is the game of the week. I have to get exposure to that. So this is all over to individual, like, take what we say, try, like, chew it for a minute, spit it out. It's over to each individual player to identify and establish their own habit patterns. We're just showing you what works for us and kind of giving you an idea of how we approach a slate that is quote unquote ugly like this one. So with that, I think we should start at the Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs, and then we'll see what comes of it. I have my own kind of conceptions of this spot, but I want to hear your perception of the spot, and we'll go from there and then move to some of these other game environments.
Yeah, it's interesting, this game in total. Obviously, the Chiefs in general, we've got a few like working factors with them. Well, one, they were getting a ton of defensive turnovers earlier in the year, and that's kind of slowed down. And it's hard in the NFL to rely on just like extremely great defense, like wire to wire over the course of the season. And that's kind of what the Chiefs have been this year. They've hit offensively in a few spots that were advantageous from outside looking in, right? Like the Raiders game, obvious spot that they could smash. The Chargers game, obvious spots. But in some of these like teams that are like either in the middle or like front end defensively, like they've really struggled. I mean, they are now 31st in the NFL in points scored below their expectation this season. Only the New England Patriots have scored fewer points than their implied totals this season than the Kansas City Chiefs. They've scored fewer than 20 points now in 5 games this year. Under Patrick Mahomes, the previous 4 years, that they did that just 6 total times.
Yeah.
So this is an offense that has kind of let us down in terms of getting there. And it's really like when you talk about the individual pieces, I mean, they're really down to 2 to 3 guys, say 2.5 guys that we can rely on offensively for them. Obviously, one is Travis Kelce still, getting the kind of still the brunt of the target share in this offense. He's hard to fit in typically like in the meta construction of how 2023 DFS has gone because of where we've been allocating salary. And he hasn't had like the Travis Kelce, like competing to be like a wide receiver 1 type of ceiling that he's had in years past either, which makes it hard. You have Isaiah Pacheco, who has been very touchdown dependent, and another guy that's been kind of easy to diagnose based on matchups when he's going to get there. We also don't know if he's going to play this weekend. He has not practiced to the point of us recording this podcast, which could make a guy like Jerick McKinnon very interesting on a slate like this. And then we have Rashee Rice, who is, kind of extending his workload. He now has set a new season high in route participation in each of the past 2 weeks. He has over 30% team target shares in over the past 2 weeks as well. So focusing on the Kansas City Chiefs from an individual basis side is very easy, but also is this team going to get there? Because they haven't regularly getting there. They've been letting us down. So starting with the Chiefs side in general, like that's kind of where I am with they are. The Bills become more interesting.
I concur 100%. And I also want to mention, or at least we need to have this in the back of our minds, that the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills are each top 5 in points allowed per game this season. So this is not just like, hey, we have Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills in this elite offense, and we have Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs in this elite offense. Thinking about this game like a matchup like this, like we would have over the previous 3 seasons, this is a very different spot, right?
Right.
Wide receivers have had a difficult time against the Bills. We know that the Chiefs are playing this too high shell that is this Steve Spags defense that is extremely intent on limiting explosive plays. So what that kind of sets up is 2 sides that are probably going to have to string together drives and march the field. And that's kind of what Spags is trying to do, is throw in these unique blitzes, throw in these unique coverages over the span of an entire drive where they're forcing teams to march 80 yards down the field and hoping to generate some disruption within that through these unique blitzes, through these generating turnovers. And that shortens games, right? And that's kind of what we're seeing the Chiefs, how we're seeing them play is like, they're kind of shortening games. They're not like saying, all right, we just got to go toe to toe to every opponent this season and let Patrick Mahomes cook. It's a little bit different mindset and mentality here. So yeah, there's equal parts downside to upside in this spot. And I think the field is just like, it's highest game total of the week. It's Patrick Mahomes. It's Josh Allen. Let's jam it in. That's also an interesting aspect or thing to think about as far as ownership and the fact that a lot of these players in this game are high priced.
Well, I love that you brought that up about how the Chiefs are approaching defense, because we've seen a cultural shift and it's a 2-game sample, since Ken Dorsey was let go. But we
Yeah.
have seen the Buffalo Bills now these past 2 games. They are 4th in the NFL in target rate to their running backs. And it's not just James Cook. They're starting to incorporate the ghost of Ty Johnson as well. But,
Yeah.
James Cook, particularly in this matchup and looking at projected ownership, feels like he's going way overlooked. He's got over 20 touches in each of the 2 games since Ken Dorsey's been fired. He has actually played every single goal to go snap for the Bills too in those 2 games. And it's, again, a 2-game sample. But
Yeah.
the way the Bills have kind of operated their offense now in these 2 games has been more of the quick game. And it could be just, structure based on their opponent, but they're also getting another opponent that invites you to do that, right? Like, the Eagles and Jets are the 2 teams they faced, and they kind of invite you to do that. So it could be a game where, like, James Cook, man, is like really getting overlooked. Like, he's a guy I keep going back to on the slate and looking at projected ownership and kind of where I see this game getting played out at. And we know he's a guy that could be like hyper efficient on a per touch basis too. We've seen it. So like, you could get big plays out of him too for upside.
Yeah, and that goes into like our game plan development for this slate and for this game in particular is like, how is the field approaching this game? They're probably like, I need to get one piece from this spot because it's the game with the highest total. Because of the changing dynamics of each of these teams, it leads to, like we talked about, equal parts chance of failure as chance of success. But the chance of success probably is a higher ceiling than in other spots around the league this week. So that leads me to, like, this is a spot where I am all in attacking the game environment, or I'm kind of just staying away and saying, hey, these teams might play to a 50-point game. But the primary pieces are so priced up that still might not be enough for us this week. So I think it's a very interesting spot to dive fully in and be like, hey, I haven't looked at ownership yet, but I feel like Josh Allen might be going overlooked. I feel like Stephon Diggs might be going overlooked on the slate. And like you mentioned, James Cook has seen some significant workload over the previous 2 weeks since Ken Dorsey was fired. So like something to the effect of Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, James Cook, nobody's going to be doing that this week, is very interesting to me, kind of playing to this game environment. You can bring it back with a Rashee Rice, with an Isaiah Pacheco if he plays, with a Jerick McKinnon if Pacheco is out. And kind of buy into this game environment. Other than that, for me personally, I'm kind of just like, I'll find some upside elsewhere. Is that kind of your read on the situation as well?
I do think, though, like it could be, and I hate to do this back-to-back times, but I think Gabe Davis is particularly interesting in this game though as well. I think when you look structurally how the Chiefs have played defense, the way they've used L'Jarius Sneed to kind of shadow wide receiver ones, and you look at the wide receiver 1 production against the Chiefs compared to wide receiver 2 production, there is a significant gap. Devontae Adams has the most receiving yards for a wide receiver 1 against the Kansas City Chiefs at 73 yards this season. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 71. A.J. Brown, only 8. Keenan Allen, 55. Tyreek Hill, 62. Oddly enough, on Sunday night, the Chiefs decided to have L'Jarius Sneed shadow Romeo Doubs instead of Christian Watson, which, hey, good for you.
I mean, I appreciate it.
But you look at the secondary wide receivers against the Chiefs, and maybe Devontae Smith doesn't count. Maybe he's more of a 1A, but he had 6 for 99. Josh Palmer, 5 for 133. Jacoby Myers, 6 for 79 and a touchdown. Jordan Addison, when Justin Jefferson was playing, had 6 for 64 and a touchdown. Josh Reynolds had 80 yards, more than Amon-Ra St. Brown in that game. Alan Lazard had 61 yards and a touchdown when these teams played. So I do think that Gabe Davis is going to have an opportunity to maybe have back-to-back solid games. And he is a guy that in this particular matchup, obviously we're not going to chase the ghost of the 4 touchdowns from the AFC Championship game a couple of years ago. But even when these teams played last year, he had 74 yards and a touchdown. So, I mean, we've done it, the Gabe Davis dance before, but I mean, we did it. We successfully hit against the Eagles. He is a guy on my radar again this week.
That is, to me, very interesting, because when I look at the Chiefs and kind of how they are handling their defense, this is a defense that is blitzing more than they ever have under Spagnuolo. They are 4th in the league in blitz rate at 34.8%. They're generating pressure at the 2nd highest rate in the league, behind only the Jets. And when we talk about like the growth of Josh Allen, he used to be a guy that was like, you blitz him because he is not good at handling the blitz. Over the last season and a half, he's kind of become more capable against the blitz. And typically what we used to see was Stephon Diggs' range. It was just they're finding the first read against the blitz, and that's very often Stephon Diggs. Now this year, in the changing dynamics of this team, they have Dalton Kincaid that can be that guy against the blitz, that quick win within the first 5 yards of line of scrimmage over the middle of the field. They have now James Cook that they're utilizing through the air at a heavier rate in the absence of Ken Dorsey. So this is a spot to me where we used to be able to say with a high degree of confidence, Josh Allen against the blitz, you play Stephon Diggs. This year, that's not necessarily the case. And particularly since Ken Dorsey was fired, that's not necessarily the case. So that kind of introduces a little bit wider range of outcomes for a guy where we used to have this feeling of you just play him when you get a high blitz rate defense against the Bills. The other part of that that's interesting is with the pressure that the Chiefs are able to generate, that to me was saying, like, I was reading that situation as Gabe Davis has a lower probability chance of having time for his routes to develop. So for me, I almost like, it was shocking to hear you say Gabe Davis, because for me personally, I was like, this could be a spot where I'm off Gabe Davis after his large week last season. So very, very interesting competing kind of methodologies leading us down that path for this game. Anything else to bring out from this spot particular?
No, I mean, it'll just be interesting to see what the Bills do with Dawson Knox's backup. I remember our very first week on the show, I was telling you that the Bills' structure of how they built this to play 12 personnel actually was limiting their offense.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see if Dawson Knox returning, did they just revert back to being like a 12 personnel team, or do they kind of go on what's worked? Because like the Bills aren't losing games because of their offense the last month. Like it's just, they've had some weird fluky things happen. Like obviously, like, the Denver game, but like this is a team that's still scoring points. They're moving the football. But I'm very curious to see if Dawson Knox returns. Do we get less Dalton Kincaid? Do we get less Khalil Shakir? And how like that impacts things. That's a variable we don't really know because Ken Dorsey was the offensive coordinator at that time. They found some things that work. Do they kind of stick with that things? Dalton Kincaid's been a larger part of the offense, has been successful, but that dynamic just is something else for us, another variable here in this game.
100%. I love that shout. That's a beautiful shout. Let's move over to probably the perceived game number 2 environment here, and that's the Seattle Seahawks and the San Francisco 49ers. Is this a spot on a slate where I don't want to say guaranteed like 25-plus point outings, but good players with good chances of 25-plus fantasy point outings are going to be harder to come by? Is this a slate where we just see the Seattle Seahawks taking on the 49ers and we jam Christian McCaffrey in?
I mean, sure, if you can, always, especially no Tyreek on the slate, the main slate. So you kind of have like this dueling thing of every week where gamers starts like, do I go with Tyreek or do I go with CMC, right? It's kind of been like how like roster construction's been this year. Well, the choices, if that's your process this year, your choices have been made this week because Tyreek Hill is not in the main slate. I know that was a big dilemma for gamers last week. How do I fit in both these guys? But this week, if you just want to jam in Christian McCaffrey, hey, you could do it this week. No Tyreek. And I mean, we've seen the Seattle defense like really start to falter against running backs. They opened up the year really good against running backs. And over the past 6 games, 28th in yards per carry allowed to running backs, 29th in rushing yards per game allowed to running backs. They've allowed a league high 8 rushing touchdowns to running backs over that span. Also, when you just look at the 49ers, like, and not to say like home road splits are a thing, but like, man, the 49ers have been a death star at home this year. Like, absolutely. Like, Christian McCaffrey's averaging almost 30 PPR points per game at home this year. Like, I mean, so yeah, it's a really easy week to say, like, I can just start my roster construction with Christian McCaffrey and say, like, all right, I'll take these, especially when you talk about no Tyreek. So, yeah, I have no issues with that. I think the Seattle side is probably the more interesting because, like, are they going to give us any pushback? Because historically in this matchup, they have not.
Yeah. Which it kind of makes sense schematically why they have not. I mean, this San Francisco 49ers team has been this extreme zone, and they don't blitz a lot because their front four is capable of generating organic pressure without blitzing. That is terrible for Geno Smith
Yes.
and an offense that is better suited to attack man. We have an aging Tyler Lockett, who is kind of the guy against zone. There's one guy though in that discussion, and that more or less eliminates DK Metcalf from my player pool, my condensed player pool this week. The one guy that is very interesting to me that I think you can play with CMC to get some sort of salary relief is Jackson Smith and Jigba. And I think JM and Pete on the block party, which they recorded a day early this week. If you haven't checked that out, go check that out. Brought up a very interesting discussion that the field would probably be looking at JSN a little differently this week had his 45-yard touchdown stood. Because remember, he caught a 45-yard touchdown last week that was overturned. That would have taken him over 100 yards and a touchdown. So at what his price is 4,100, something like that. 4,100. That would invoke a little bit different feelings for us, or at least from the field this week. That is a spot where we know that he's kind of been hovering around his median expectation the entire season, or maybe median minus, median below. At some point, this dude, and DK Metcalf has been saying it, Tyler Lockett has been saying it, Geno Smith has been saying it, Pete Carroll has been saying it. At some point, this man, because of his pedigree and his talent in this offense, is going to hang a 100-yard and 2-touchdown game. It's coming at some point. Like, is it likely to come against San Francisco? I don't know, but at 4,100, this is a party that I want to be early to for sure. So that is very interesting for me. You mentioned something about home road splits, and this was it's funny that you brought that up because this was kind of a point of emphasis in my process this week, primarily because of the Detroit Lions and they're playing on grass on the road in Chicago. And so I was digging in and trying to figure out, like, are home road splits a thing? And I think they're a thing if the coaching staff and the team wants to make them a thing. Let's look at the top 7 scoring offenses in the league this year. From Dallas, Miami, San Francisco, Philadelphia, Buffalo, Detroit, and Baltimore. All 7 of those teams are averaging 27 points or more per game. You look at the home road splits in scoring amongst those teams. Dallas, 41
Miami,
points per game at home, 23 on the road. Miami, 38.8 at home, 27 on the road. San Francisco, 30.2 at home, 28.7 on the road. So this is a team that they just put up points. Doesn't matter where they're playing.
Baltimore's another one of those teams too.
Yeah, Baltimore, 30.7 at home, 23.3 on the road. The Philadelphia Eagles, 30.5 at home, 24.3 on the road. You get down to the Lions, 28.7 at home, 25.8 on the road. Like, yeah, some of their road games have come in a dome last week against New Orleans Saints. But this, I think, the standard bias that is associated with Jared Goff with this Lions team is they can't put up points on the road and they're only a dome team. I challenge that, and I challenge you to challenge that this week. And I challenge you to disregard weather and look at this game through a new light, because that is, I dove headfirst into that home road splits discussion. We'll just say it like that this week. Very, very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, these two teams in Chicago last year scored 61 points. I think the Lions one was, I think it was 31-30. That was Cole Kmet had like 2 touchdowns. But they played a barn burner. Is the roundabout way to get to it.
Yep. Before the discussion is very clearly leading us to that game. We'll get there very shortly. Before we get there, are there any other places of interest in San Francisco and Seattle? Are we interested in Brock Purdy? Are we interested in Deebo Samuel, who put up a rushing score and I think 20 DK points the last time these two teams played? And then finally, the last question is, are you buying into any potential changes from the fact that this will be the second time these two teams have played in 2 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, and it's the 5th time they played the last 2 years. And the 49ers have just manhandled them in every game. I mean, the games that they've won by 18, 8, and 20. Just kind of, they just haven't had an answer, man. Pete Carroll also historically pretty bad as a double-digit dog historically as well. So not a great spot to like really go in and chase what Seattle did against Dallas. Like you said, Seattle's interesting because they have the pieces to beat like defenses that are very aggressive. And that's what happened last Thursday. I mean, you open up the game with a 73-yard touchdown where DK Metcalf wins one-on-one and man coverage is out the gates, right? JSN is really wide splits against man. I was on JSN last week, and this week I'm a little cooler because of his splits. He's third on the team in yards per out run against zone coverage, third on the team in target rate. But his zone stuff, his man coverage stuff was way up. So I was like, oh, this is going to be a spot where he can pop. And he almost did. He almost got there. But I do think that Deebo Samuel, historically, when you look at how the 49ers use him, he sets up to play well in this matchup. And Deebo's another one of these guys. You always hate to feel like you're chasing points with Deebo because the way he gets them. But like structurally, it looks like he can put another good one together because when they face like zone heavy opponents, like he has been kind of the guy. And Seattle, another one of these teams, they play zone coverage on 83.4% of their snaps. He's been targeted on 24% of his routes compared to 16% of his routes against man coverage. That includes Thanksgiving. Every single target he had was against zone coverage. And that also marked the season high targets per game that he had in a game where also Brandon Ayuk played, which is significant because the other one came when he was out. And we know that when one of those guys misses, the other guy always smashes. So I do think it structurally makes sense. Seattle still has been really good against like boundary wide receivers. They are still a team, I believe, that limits production to outside wide receivers. So like, and Brandon Ayuk can do what he did on Thanksgiving, score a touchdown. Still, he scored in, I think, 4 straight games. But I don't think it's a high target game for Brandon Ayuk. And I do think that Deebo Samuel structurally fits the way you would want to attack the Seattle defense, the way they play. So I do think he's on the board again. So I do think Deebo is involved.
The Seattle Seahawks are basically the optimal opponent for Deebo Samuel.
Yes.
And I say that because they play an extreme rate of zone coverage, but they also are capable of generating pressure. And when you look at Deebo Samuel's targets per route run and target share when Brock Purdy is under pressure, it jumps off the page. Like, this is the guy that they scheme aerial work to. He and CMC are the guys that they scheme aerial work to when Brock Purdy is under pressure. And that also, and we talked about this prior to, we didn't on our show because they played on Thanksgiving, right? But I talked about this somewhere. I forget where it was. The fact that George Kittle plays kind of more of an inline role, like more of his snaps come in line as this like offensive lineman 5.5. They add to the protection against teams that are able to generate pressure organically, whether it's coming from lower blitz rates and organic pressure, or whether it's high blitz rates teams. But against teams that are able to generate pressure, they typically keep George Kittle in line at a higher rate. So that means less slot snaps. Typically, like against teams that don't generate a ton of pressure, George Kittle will line up in the slot. And if it's a run play, they might motion him down to in line. If it's a pass play, they might motion him out wide. Against teams that can generate pressure, they typically keep him in line. That affects his route participation rate. That affects his receiving, obviously. The other side of that coin is George Kittle is a player that can turn 3 targets into 100 yards and a score. We saw it. What was it? In week 10 against Jacksonville Jaguars, where he went for 3 catches, 116 yards and a score against another fast defense that can generate pressure. So all of that to say, Kittle is typically a guy where we can have a fairly confident assessment of how he's going to be utilized based on the matchup. He can win even with decreased route participation and all those things because he is a manimal and he is extremely good with the ball in his hands. So I typically in these spots look to ownership to kind of guide my decision-making process because on paper, this is not a good spot for George Kittle. That said, he can still win. So if he's coming in at low ownership, that's when I'll kind of pull that trigger. So again, I haven't looked at ownership. That's kind of my mindset with George Kittle in a spot like this, though.
Yeah, he looks to be FanDuel. He's going to be one of the more popular plays where he's priced, but on DraftKings, he's projecting to be single digit. So,
okay, yeah. So that's the kind of just the process, the peek behind the curtain with how to handle an offense where the field kind of struggles to identify who is likeliest to succeed. This week it's CMC, it's Deebo Samuel. a little bit less excited about playing Brock Purdy. I, again, have not looked at ownership, but I get the feeling because there's fewer projectable value pieces that Brock Purdy is probably going to garner some ownership this week. Again, I'm less excited in that spot. For me, top plays on paper here in this game are CMC and JSN, and I think you can play them together. Anything to add to this spot?
No. I think we covered it.
Let's quickly jump on this question from NBA's Rigged. Yeah, I agree. Great show. Is Stroud versus the Jets, Purdy versus Seattle, or Lamar versus the Rams a better DFS play this week? Rich, over to you.
I mean, just from like a blanket statement, like I would easily say Lamar Jackson, but just because when you talk about the context of the slate and like where we talk about the Ravens home splits, and like so we did talk about the Purdy's home splits too, but the access to like 30-point games, right? Like what Brock Purdy has to have to get there. When you look at Brock Purdy spike weeks, it's like last week where he's getting like the 4 passing touchdowns or like a lot of the yak, right? And like, are the 49ers going to get that this week? But and then the Rams have really struggled against mobile quarterbacks this year, which is another reason too. I like Lamar. Stroud, definitely not a spot I'm anticipating much of a ceiling.
Concur across the board. And I think Lamar, we'll talk about that game environment. Another weather game. Again, let's pump the brakes on the weather discussion right now.
But even Lamar, like the type of guy like through weather, like can get there.
Yes. And there's some very interesting aspects from that game that I want to talk about, and we'll get that here shortly. But before we get over to that, good question. NBA is rigged. Agree, by the way. Let's quickly talk about the Lions and the Bears, because that was where the discussion was naturally taking us. Before I give my thoughts, I want to just hear from you, Rich. I've given a little bit of kind of how I'm feeling from this game, but over to you. Let's talk about the Lions and the Bears.
No, yeah, I pretty much echo your sentiments from earlier. I mean, this Lions defense has really started to struggle. I mean, over the past 6 games, not even the past month, the past 6 games, they're 31st in the league in points allowed per drive. Over that span, they're 30th in scoring rate allowed per drive. These are 2 of the worst red zone defenses in the NFL as well. So like there's opportunity here for there to be points scored, right? Like, so that looks good. I mean, definitely for the Goff side of things, I think like Goff's one of these guys for like DFS, like, I'm never like, he's never a guy like I'm super like infatuated with just because he doesn't come with like a rushing component and like, and it's different when you talk about like a guy like Purdy who doesn't really come like with the, like a main rushing component, even though he's a little more mobile, which I think one of the things people get wrong about like the Garoppolo Purdy comparisons is that Purdy out of structure is just infinitely better than Jimmy Garoppolo ever was. But Goff's typically a guy that like, I'm looking for like a really, really soft spot to like play him in DFS. And I think this spot offers upside, but I don't consider it like necessarily like a soft spot for him because the Bears pass defense is like, it's been formidable and decent. Like they're a better run defense than a pass defense. But I think that like they're going to like Goff from his side is going to have to work for it. Like there's not going to be a lot of explosives for the Lions. It's going to be a lot of, Jahmyr Gibbs, Laporta, Amon-Ra stuff this week. But the Bears side is where I see like the explosives, right? Like the opportunity to get explosives. Obviously, Fields has rushed for 100 yards in 3 straight games against the Lions, which is pretty wild. If you want to alt line like that and chase it, you can get like 4-1 odds places. But and then DJ Moore has just been on like this amazing heater, like with Justin Fields. I mean, the past 4 full games he played with Justin Fields, he's been a top 10 scoring wide receiver in every game, including the game against the Lions a couple weeks ago. Don't also want to ignore, like we talked about Cole Kmet having like 2 touchdown potential access. He's one of those guys you can never ignore on like slates like this when you like the game environment. So those are like the guys I'm kind of looking at. I don't know what to do with the Bears backfield at all, so I'm just going to ignore it.
Yeah, it doesn't exist. I like that. Yeah, you look at DJ Moore. I mean, 5 of the last 6 fully healthy Justin Fields games, he's gone over 100 yards receiving. So that is something that is very interesting to us, right? Furthermore, in that discussion, let's break down the Bears. We've had 2 games all season where all of Roschon Johnson and Khalil Herbert and Dante Foreman have been healthy together. It was week 1 and it was week 11. In those games, it was 3-headed backfield split. It was like nobody is asserting themselves. It was like everyone's 40% snap rate and below. Everyone's seeing kind of this rotation. With Dante Foreman getting 2 full practices in this week to start the week, coming off his ankle injury. I expect he's going to return. I expect this backfield is going to be a messy 3-way timeshare. I am not chasing the 73% snap rate from last week from Roschon Johnson. I haven't seen anybody talking about that around the industry this week, but I could see him gaining steam as a potential salary saver on a slate where we don't have a lot of it. But like you said, if this team, and we're talking about Chicago Bears here, if this team is succeeding, it's likeliest to come through 3 players this week. It's likeliest to come through Justin Fields. You mentioned 3 straight great games against the Lions with 100 yards rushing. It's likeliest to come from DJ Moore. 5 of the last 6 fully healthy games for Fields, he's gone over 100 yards. And it's likeliest to come from Cole Kmet. The combination of DJ Moore and Cole Kmet has combined for over 50% of the team's targets this season. They have combined for 11 of the 12 receiving touchdowns for the Bears this season. And they have combined for almost, or I think it's 43% of the team's available air yards. They've also combined for over 40% of the team's red zone targets. It's like those 2 players are this passing offense. So a very fun and very easy bet to make is to bet on the Chicago Bears passing offense this week. Not a lot of people are doing it. It's a quote unquote scary weather game. Oh, the wind goes. I'm scared. Sorry, I have to poke fun at that because I think the field just continues to overweight.
How many good decisions do you think in fantasy football you've made in your career based on weather?
Negative. Zero.
Like we will have to make like the 10 commandments eventually because like we talked about tinkering with our lineups the past 2 weeks, each of us. Like we'll have to make like a 10 commandments of like that don't. And weather, I think weather would be on there for sure.
Oh yeah, thou shalt not tinker on Sunday morning. Thou shalt not overweight weather. That's the first 2. That's like commandment 1 and 2 for sure. Thou shalt play a member of the San Francisco 49ers on every slate. That's probably number 3. Yeah, that's so like, and that's, you're betting on one thing. You have to get one thing right, and that's the scoring comes through the air for the Bears. If that happens, you can capture immense upside through Justin Fields, DJ Moore, and Cole Kmet. And like we've seen it twice already this season where Justin Fields tossed for 4 touchdowns in back-to-back games earlier this season. If that happens, say he tosses 3 touchdowns, goes over 100 yards rushing, and those 3 touchdowns, high probability chance that they're going to DJ Moore and Cole Kmet, you can capture immense upside with those 3 players this week. And where I will push the leverage even further, typically when you're talking about a team overstack where you have a quarterback plus 2 pass catchers, the standard DFS mantra is, I got to find a bring back. I would challenge that this week. And the reason is, if you look at this Lions team, we talked about the fact that their games are averaging 62 points scored over the last 4 weeks. Look at their fantasy production in those massive shootout games. Amon-Ra St. Brown has 1 game of GPP relevance in that span. Sam Laporta has 1 game of GPP relevance in that span. Jahmyr Gibbs has 1 game of GPP relevance in that span. And that's compared to their current price for week 14. Yeah. This team is so spread out.
And David Montgomery is 0.
And David Montgomery has 0, exactly. And now he's facing the team that is seeding the second fewest yards per rush this season. So I don't think you need to force a bring back, even in your Chicago Bears overstacks. I think that's a very easy way to generate some leverage, search for some ceiling this week, and do it in a way that the field is not likely to. Immediate reactions to that, Rich. Okay.
No, I like it. I think when you look at how the Bears play defense, they play a ton of cover 2. They're second in the NFL rated cover 2. That's been the defense that has given the Lions their passing game the most trouble. Only Mike Evans has a 100-yard receiving game against the Bears this season. That's it. Amon-Ra had a solid game against them the first time these teams played. Like he had 77 and a touchdown. Real solid game. Like, like Amon-Ra is going to get his 6+ catches. But like, are they going to come with like when he faced the Chargers, right? Like, are they going to come with 150 yards? Probably not here. That's why I think it's going to be a game where the Lions have like a lot of completions, but like it's not a high yards per pass attempt game for Goff.
100%. And that same discussion, looking specifically at Amon-Ra St. Brown, I mean, as consistent as they come this season, but The other side of that coin is he has exactly 2 games where he has gone over 100 yards and scored this season. So
Yeah.
the chances of him being a player that you had to have this week, I think, are minimal. And I think you can just get access to this game environment, which I am giddy about, just through the Bears and this concentration in their offense and through
And the
Justin
pricing
Fields.
line's way more up for the Bears guys. Like you said, I mean, these Lions guys have been like Laporta's been priced as a top 3 tight end basically since like week 3.
Yeah.
Amon-Ra's lived over 8K the entire
Mhm.
year. And then both running backs for their backfield split are overpriced.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's
So
not
that's
that
my
they can't get there and score a touchdown and stuff like, but like getting a touchdown out of either Lions running back hasn't been enough.
Yeah. 100%. And you're going to need the blueprint of running back production in 2023. You need 100 yards on the ground, 2 scores, or 1 score plus enough receiving work
Enough
to
catches,
offset
yeah,
that.
enough
So,
catches.
yeah. So Jahmyr Gibbs is probably the likelier of the 2. But even
Mhm.
then, I'm not overly excited to jump into that. All right, man.
Lockstep.
Yes, that is good to hear. Let's talk about this Rams and Baltimore game, shall we? That I think is the next game on the hierarchy for us this week. And again, I'll throw it over to you. What are you seeing from this spot?
Well, again, it's just are the Ravens going to be like this, like again, like bringing back like the Death Star at home, right? Like and especially against these NFC teams. These NFC
Yeah.
teams that have come to Baltimore, they haven't come out very well. Like, it hasn't gone well for them. And McVay's another one of these guys historically as a large underdog. Like his teams have really not performed. So I'm curious to see how they perform after coming off of like this 3-game stretch of, facing the Cardinals,
Yeah.
facing a beleaguered kind of Browns defense. Like, are they going to have success? The Ravens have absolutely nuked wide receivers this year. So, the guys we want to pay up for, the Puka Nakuas, I mean, what are we even doing with Cooper Kupp at this point of life? Cooper Kupp's definitely not healthy either. Like we've definitely seen like him over the past month. Like he's definitely playing through multiple ankle injuries and stuff like that. So really, it's just kind of, to me, is just, can Kyron Williams kind of keep this heater going? We've seen the Ravens kind of be a team that's gotten a little leaky against running backs recently. We know like the volume's gonna be there, but like, are we gonna play a running back that's almost a touchdown dog on the road for like upside? So like I'm having trouble like finding like where the Rams get, like where we get pushback here. And that's where like my biggest hurdle with this game is. I don't care about the weather. I don't really care about anything else. And like really, so I just keep coming back to is just like a Lamar Jackson ISO play. Like do we even need to stack Lamar Jackson this week?
Yeah, that's a very interesting discussion. We talked about like Kyron Williams has the most valuable running back role and workload right now on everybody not named Christian McCaffrey. Like he is RB2 right now in fantasy land. So can he win in this matchup? And I think it is very interesting to look at this Baltimore Ravens defense and look for some causality. Why are they struggling more than they have in recent history against the run? We look at Michael Pierce, their nose tackle. He has been on the injury report every week since week 3. It has been toe, it has been knee, it has been ankle. This dude is banged up, and he is like one of the more immovable objects at nose tackle in the entire league. He has been that way. He learned under, who was the previous nose tackle they had in Baltimore? I forgot his name. Michael Pierce did not come into the league and just be this dominant force. He learned behind like one of the greatest nose tackles to ever play the game. And of course, I forgot his name right now. He learned under him for like 2-3 seasons. And then Michael Pierce stepped into that role and has been this elite nose tackle, but he's been playing injured. And last week we saw Chuba Hubbard go for 104 yards and 2 scores against this Baltimore team. And I'm looking at like, why? How did that happen? Well, we had Michael Pierce, who was banged up, and we also had 2 injuries to key linebackers from the Baltimore Ravens. So they're struggling with defensive injuries. Those 2 linebackers were, who the hell? Oh my God. Now I might have been thinking about another team. Anyway, shit. I lost it.
Did you just go on a Buccaneers tangent?
I did. I'm an idiot. Anyway, we digress.
We talked about the lack of sleep.
Yeah, dude. That was the Buccaneers. Thank you. They were missing 2 linebackers, and they played the fucking Panthers. Anyway, we digress. But yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with Michael Pierce. Sorry, guys, that was on me. Any other spots? The other spot that's interesting to me from this game is one Isaiah Likely. And why is that? We have this Rams team that we know they're playing extreme rates of cover 2, extreme rates of cover 3. They're top 5 in zone coverage rates this season. And they've been successful at overperforming the talent that they have on their defense, because this was a team, lest you forget, we came into this season in best ball land. We're like, you attack the Rams, dude. Look at, they have more rookies and more undrafted free agents on defense than any team in the previous 10 seasons. We're like, this team is going to be trash on D. Well, they have done well. And that is over to their coaching. Hats off to them. They have done well to overperform the talent that they have on defense. So against a defense that is playing extreme rates of zone, they're trying to limit big plays. They're trying to do enough to generate some level of disruption, force teams to march the field, and then hope to create turnovers and disruptive plays from there. Against that, we have, looking at the Baltimore Ravens, their primary piece against zone coverage heavy teams has been Mark Andrews. Over the previous 4 seasons, it has been Mark Andrews. We look at Odell Beckham Jr. He has been the guy in this offense. We're talking like over 30% targets per route run rate against man coverage this year. Struggled against zone. We look at Zay Flowers. Struggled to separate against zone. Mm-hmm. So who is the guy schematically and talent-wise that is built to take advantage of zone coverage? It's the tight end position. And I think Isaiah Likely is very interesting as a skinny potential partner with Lamar Jackson this week. Something like, I mean, even earlier this season, we saw Lamar Jackson have a 4 touchdown game. 2 came on the ground, 2 came through the air, and they both went to the tight end position. So that was Mark Andrews back then, but that is something that could take place this week. I love Lamar Jackson, Isaiah Likely. I think you can play it by itself. And I think if you're going to bring it back with somebody, it probably should be Kyren Williams. And I think you can do that in a plus CV fashion.
Yeah. Well, I got some good news for you, or bad news. You might take it. Projected to be the highest rostered tight end on both sites this week.
Isaiah Likely. Well, is it going to be paired? Where's Lamar Jackson at? Is it going to be paired with L. Jax, or is it one off?
Well, I imagine it's tough to say because, you know, typically if you pick a quarterback, like gamers, it's indoctrinated in their brains now to put him with a pass catcher. So I would assume that will overlap, but maybe you get some people chasing the Zay Flowers stuff. But like, I'm with you. Like, you know, Zay Flowers, another one of these guys, is really dramatic splits versus zone and man this season. So I would be drawn to Likely as well. And Likely's a guy too, even if he is heavily rostered, we're not talking like 30-40% anyways, that at his salary and what he does, like, it's not like a guy you have to avoid necessarily because he's popular.
I dig it, man. We are already approaching the end in standard us fashion. I want to throw it over to you. Are there any spots that are piquing your interest that we have not talked about yet?
No, I mean, just more like individual stuff. I mean, obviously there are a few that I think are interesting. Broncos Chargers, I think, is a game because it's that 4:00 pivot game. We always kind of like to have one of those. We always like to talk about one of those because I think people will treat Bills Chiefs as the popular game for the reasons we talk about. And then you get the 49ers, naturally the 49ers, because they have ownership regardless. But I mean, Broncos Chargers has a few individual components that I think are pretty interesting as well. First of all, both these defenses are way over exceeding their peripheral metrics. Like, these are two defenses that give up a lot of yards and a lot of yards per drive, but they get turnovers and it kind of bails them out in the scoring department. But neither one of these defenses are particularly as good as the results have shown, especially over the past 6 weeks. So I do think that this game has a pathway to being more exciting, and it's a Chargers game. So, hey, things can get weird on their own. It's indoors. Like we talked about weather this weekend. It's indoors in LA, a team that has no home field advantage anyways.
Yeah.
And then we have a couple of these components. Like, obviously, I think the one standout people will probably get to naturally is Courtland Sutton. You know, the Chargers have been getting flooded by, you know, wide receivers. You get massive touchdown equity at Courtland Sutton. I don't know if people will chase the Jerry Jeudy stuff. I mean, I played a lot of Jerry Jeudy last week because he's been like their zone beater this year. And man, dude, when Russ didn't throw him that ball on that 4th and 1, I was yeah, I was so heartbroken.
Fuming.
But the thing was, Sean Payton called Russ out after the game on it. Like the head coach publicly called out, hey, Russ is leaving stuff on the field with Jerry Jeudy. So does that, it's always tough to put like objectively, like quantify this to the next game. But like, does Russ now force anything to Jerry Jeudy this week?
That's very interesting. And Sean Payton and Russ are both like entities that you can kind of buy into a little bit of the coach speak or the like behind the scenes stuff. That's very interesting.
And then I also know no one's going to do it, man, because everything's happening. And I'm not even trying to pull anyone to the depths with me, but like, what do you do with Austin Eckler in this game?
Who's coming with me?
Because I mean, this is a spot that we have just regularly targeted, right? Like even as the Broncos have improved, like they are just getting flooded by running backs. Like absolutely flooded. And I know Eckler looks dusty. He absolutely does. But this is a guy that still, before the last 3 weeks, he rattled off 3 straight top 5 RB scoring games. So like, it's not like he's been awful all year. It's not like a Breece Hall situation, right? Where like Breece Hall's literally been dead outside of one game. Like we do have a sample where like Eckler has RB1 production. So he's like a larger field guy for me more than small field stuff because there's been some hints that Joshua Kelly could get some more work. But like, man, like I'm interested in like maybe Sutton Eckler minis and stuff like that, or just this game being just kind of overlooked and being weird because we can always play Keenan Allen and like, so I don't know, man. This game is it's very weird for me, but I think it has potential to be like kind of a low key decent DFS game.
Yeah, and Eckler is priced at his lowest price point all season. The first time all year he's below 8K. What is interesting to me also from this Denver defense is they very quietly, they lead the league in takeaways, which is
and that's what's masked there. Like that's what's masked all their yardage they're giving up.
Yeah. Yeah, that is very, very interesting. I like that shout a good bit. It's likely to go extremely overlooked on this slate. I like the Jerry. I'm gonna go dig into that a little bit more now. That Jerry Jeudy shout, man. I want to go see. I want to find the clip of Sean Payton calling out Russ. And I did Russ respond at all, or was he asked?
I have not seen like a Russ response, but man, because I was on Jeudy last week because the
flop
stuff
lag
was Houston.
Flop lag. Back to the well, baby.
I mean, he was so naked. He was so naked on that play.
I know. I saw that. I remember that. Parting shots, man. I think we didn't talk about the Colts and the Bengals.
We run out of time.
I feel like Jake Browning is going to get some significant ownership on the slate after what he did last week. I think a lot of it's going to be paired with Jamar Chase. I am very interested to play Zach Moss with Jamar Chase as a mini correlation and not bring Jake Browning to the party. To the party. That is very interesting to me. I think that CJ Stroud and in particular, Nico Collins is very interesting. Yes, it's against the Jets, but Nico Collins without Tank Dell on the field is like a top 6-7 wide receiver this year, particularly against zone, which we know the Jets are running at an extreme rate. Noah Brown is potential to give us some salary relief. We saw what he did in back-to-back games earlier this season when either Nico Collins was out for one game and then I think it was Robert Woods that was out for the other. So he's probably entering into a more robust role for that team. It's very interesting, I think, Nico Collins and Noah Brown this week. We got to give you time for your out the door. Do you have any out the door shots for us?
No, my out the door guy this week to not overlook is Bijan Robinson, though.
Okay, I dig it. I'll go. We got to take your out the door shots seriously. We have a proven track record of success here, so I'm going to go dig into that a little more. As always, Rich, thank you for joining us. This was Searching for Ceiling, presented by 1 Week Season and Sharp Football Analysis. Let me just get some shade thrown at me before we get out of here. Play Houston if you like giving away money. Thanks for that, dude. But as always, we'll be here every week. We like Rich said, we got 5 more slates, man. 5 more main slates.
5 more.
So let's get that ship before we are out of here this season. As always, Rich, thanks, man. We will see you next week, y'all.
1 Week Season.